it could have been a chess game. There is a king involved and there is a queen. There is a knight and there is a bishop. There is cunning, there is planning. There is strategy. There is tactics. It is an incredible story. And we talked the last couple of weeks about the first part. And we are at the part now to where the stakes are high. It is a life or death situation. The king is made aware of the plot that Haman has to destroy her family and her people. And she has taken time to put together a scenario, a plan, if you will. I call this lesson the Queen's Gambit. We pick up as the queen goes to see the king. It is a bold move. It is a decisive move. At the same time, it is a feint. Now, when you say, well, why was it so bold? It is because you don't really understand the culture they lived in. The king could not be approached unless he called for you, even by his queen. And the queen that was the predecessor of Esther, she had been dethroned and probably killed. So for her to go uncalled, it was a bold move. But she did all the preparation and she prepared to see the king. And she goes to see the king. And the king is favorably impressed. And he says to her, "What can I do for you?" And she says, "I have something I want to ask you. It's very important. But before I do, I want you to come and let me feed you supper. Have a banquet." And he said, "I'll be glad to." And he said, "What else can I do?" And she said, "Bring your prime minister Haman." That's the feint. So Haman, it makes his day. She prepares the meal. And they have a banquet. And it seems to have gone well. The king is pleased. Haman, it makes his day. Because he is the only person invited besides the king to the banquet. And he's on cloud nine, if you will. And the king at the end of the meal says, "Okay, what is your request?" And now she pushes it just a little bit. She says, "I do have a request, but I'm not quite prepared for you to hear it yet. Would you please, if you had a good time tonight, would you please let me have a banquet for you and Haman tomorrow also?" And the king says, "Yes." He goes about his business. Haman goes about his business. Haman goes home and he is elated. He tells his wife and he tells his friends what had happened. And he is in such a jubilant mood, except for that one thing. When he went home, there was that little Jew there, that Mordecai, the one that would not bow to him and show him honor, and that just burned him up. With everything going his way, that burned him up. And so he thought, I tell you what, I'm going to go see the king tomorrow. And I'm going to get special permission to hang Mordecai from the gallows that I'm going to build in my own courtyard. That's what I'm going to do. As I have told you earlier, this book is one of two in the Bible that does not mention God. But if you start to read chapter 6, you start to see the providence of God. Because the king, as he goes to sleep that night, he wakes up, he cannot sleep. And it is probably something that he does on a regular basis. But when he could not sleep, if he had insomnia, he had a reading room. And he would actually have people that were there, I guess it was a scribe, that would actually read to him. Now you think about the king's library. How many documents, how many books would be in the king's library. And on this night, on this special night, the scribe goes through and he picks out a book of some events that happened a year, maybe 2, maybe 3 years before. And he reads about this treason against the king. And the queen had told the king they had done an investigation, found it to be true, and the king's life was spared. And the king looked at the scribe and said, well, how did Esther find out about it? And they looked in the book and he said, well, there was a guy, I don't know really if they're kin or whatnot, but she got word from a little guy by the name of Mordecai. And the king thought for a moment and he said, well, what have we done to honor Mordecai? And they looked and they said, well, nothing. I guess just in the excitement of everything, there was nothing done to honor him. And the king said, I cannot just let this stand. This cannot stand. About that time, and it had to be early in the morning, Haman had come in with his request in his back pocket, if you will, waiting in the courtyard, wanting to be the first to see the king. And the king says, I've got to do something about this. Is there anybody around? And one of his servants says, well, Haman just came in. He has something he wants to talk to you about. And the king says, bring him in. Can you see the irony here? Can you see Haman about to ask the king, could he have permission to kill Mordecai? And the king, reading about what Mordecai had done from him, Haman comes in and the king says, I know you have something you want to talk to me about, but let me go first. What should be done to the man whom the king wants to honor? Well, oh Haman. This is where you see pride, his arrogance, and a big jolt of narcissism thrown in all at once. And he starts thinking, why, the king, who would he want to honor more than me? I just had a banquet with he and the queen, and I am going back tonight. The king, in his subtle way, is asking me, what do I want? And so he puts on his thinking cap and he thinks, I can't ask for too much. I'm already wealthy. I'm already the prime minister, so I'll make it something kind of light and even endear myself to him even more. And he says, well, king, I don't know who you're talking about. But if it were me, if I were in your place, I would say, let's take this man. Let's put him in your robe. Put him on your horse. Get some soldiers to go in front of him and make a proclamation and just go through the city and say, this is the man whom the king wants to honor. And that should be enough. And the king sits there and says, that's a good idea. Haman, I'm going to put you in charge. The guy's name is Mordecai. You do it. And Haman could not beg off. You did not beg off when it was the king. For when the king said it, it was written and it was done. Haman spent the worst day of his life. Putting everything together, putting a parade together, putting it all together, and then going to fetch Mordecai at his home. And he spends all day working his way through the city. And it's finally late in the afternoon. It's over. He goes home, he's tired, he's weary, he's frustrated, he's angry all at the same time. All he wants to do is get a shower or a tub bath, however they did it back then, and he wanted to go to bed. And about the time he gets in the tub, there's a knock on the door. Did you forget you have to eat with the king and the queen tonight? Oh! And he got ready in record time, but he didn't want to go. He put on his happy face, and he made conversation. He was good at that. You don't get to be prime minister without being able to make conversation. But it seemed the atmosphere was different tonight. The food was good. The king was in a good mood, but something was going on with the queen that he could not read. And Haman was a man who could read most people, because you could not become prime minister without being able to read people pretty well. But he could tell there was something bothering her, something really bothering her. And as the meal wore on, she became more and more withdrawn. And as it was over, you finally get to that point to where the king says, "Okay, Esther, tell me what your request is." And as soon as he said that, the queen just breaks out in tears. She starts bawling. She falls to her knees in front of the king and says, "Please, please don't kill me. My family has been sold into slavery. My family has been sold to death. My people have been sold, and I have been sold. Please don't kill me." And this was real because the king had killed the queen before her. And she's crying tears, and the king is dumbfounded. Haman is dumbfounded. And he says, What are you talking about? What are you talking about? There's nobody going to kill you. You are the queen of Persia. And she looks up and points the finger at Haman. And she says, Haman is that wicked man. Haman has made a fool of you. Haman has told you all these lies about my people, all these lies about my family, and all these lies about me. Haman has me under the threat of death, and I am one of the ones because I am a Jew. I am one of these people that he talked to you and said that we were traitors, but there's no truth to it. And the king doesn't know what to do, and you can see the blood just draining out of Haman's face. And the king is getting furious. And he stands up and he says, "Give me a minute." And he walks to the side of the room, goes out the door where there is a porch. And Haman's mind's working, buddy, and it's working overtime, and it's working fast. And he knows he has to do something quick. He was put into check, buddy, and he did not see it coming. He had not done his homework. And so he starts to try to talk to the queen. He sees the queen as his only way out of this. And he starts to talk to her. "Please, I did not know it was you. I did not know Mordecai was your family. I did not know." And he starts to apologize or say whatever he could. The queen and he are left alone in the room. They're the only two there. The queen is afraid of this man. He is getting close to her. He is invading her space in modern terminology. And she starts backing up. And if you read the scripture, man, it is something else. It said that she tripped and fell on a bed. It might be what we would think of as a couch. But she tripped and went backwards. Instinctively, she probably grabbed for him. Instinctively, he grabbed for her. But she had already lost her balance. She falls down on the bed. Haman falls right down on top of her. It is just at that moment that the king walks back into the room, sees Haman laying on top of his wife, and he just blows his stack and says, "Are you going to rape my wife while I'm in the room watching you?" And he calls for the guards. And the guards come running in. And he said, "Take this man, and I don't even know what to do with him." And one of the guards said, "King, you know Mordecai. You know the one that we honored today. Haman was going to kill him. In fact, he built a gallows where he could hang him in front of his own house. And the king says, take Haman and hang him on the gallows that were made for Mordecai. There is a verse in Psalm 9:15 that says, the wicked shall fall into the pit that they themselves have dug. The wicked shall be caught in the snare that they themselves have laid. John 12:48. The Scripture says that he whom you have rejected will one day be your judge. We live increasingly in a world that does not honor God. A world where you look around and it's hard to see the works of God. So we are in a world where you cannot see Him, and many times you cannot feel Him. Understand this, that those that perpetuate wickedness and evil in this world, from our advantage, from our point of view, we might think they're getting away with it. We cannot see the judgment of God. But don't ever lose sight of the fact that the wicked will fall into the pit that they themselves have dug. And if it is not in this world, it will be in the world to come.